and inshallah ta'ala, we will be on schedule for the rest of the day, bi'idhnillah. So inshallah ta'ala, our first session this morning is about retirement accounts. So we will have two speakers in the first session, which is 1 hour. And inshallah ta'ala, first speaking will be Brother Muhammad Nasr. So نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن تتقبل منا جميعا وأن يفيدنا مما سمعنا بإذن الله. طيب Brother Muhammad, تفضل مشكورا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Thank you, Brother Sheikh Imam Rafiq, for the introduction. My name again is Muhammad Nasr. I work for Allied Asset Advisors, which is the investment advisor for the Iman Fund, which is a mutual fund here in the United States, where our headquarters is outside of Chicago. So I'm from Illinois. We have a little bit of a national, international community here. So thank you very much for coming. I'd like to thank Amja for hosting this event every year. They have done a great job. I know when we travel, you see a lot of imams, and each masjid has a different understanding of the issues that our community is facing. And alhamdulillah, Amja has been able to kind of give us, as a community, guidelines as to how we can be able to differentiate our halal and harams and tackle the issues that we face. So I would like to start with a disclosure, because we are a regulated company. So the important disclosure is that, as you can see, it is on the screen. It basically means that anything that you invest in, there's a risk of loss, of principal loss, and this is something we have to actually say when we present. So that takes care of the mutual fund investing involves risk, principal loss is possible. Okay. So the part that we want to talk about is retirement. Do you mind if I ask, all of you, mashallah, imams, are working for masajid, and it is a very thankless job, I believe, very tough. But how many of you have a retirement account, like a 401k, IRA? 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Believe it or not, majority of our masajid don't offer retirement plans. So that when what happens is over time, you, as working for, as long as, alhamdulillah, you're healthy, you're working, you're able to supply, you're able to have funds available for you and your family. What happens when you retire? Where are you going to get your money from? There was an imam, a scholar in California, where they had, after he served this community of Muslims in the U.S. for decades, I think 5, if not more, he had no money to survive. His family he became sick, and nobody was able to help him. And they had to do a fundraising, which is a shame for an imam. So we have to be able to, not only for our imams, but for our community, that we have to have retirement plans so that when we grow old, we are able to have, we don't need anyone. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us sustenance and not to be able to ask anyone for help. But that comes only by planning. So we have to plan for that day. We have to plan today for the day when we retire. We cannot just wait until we get old and then wake up and say, oh my God, Ya Allah, we need to have a solution for our retirement. So there are multiple ways for retirement. One of the things we have in the United States is Social Security. And many of you heard of Social Security? Everybody? Yeah? So most of us will be eligible for Social Security. But believe it or not, masajid don't have to pay your Social Security tax. So some masajid might not. So you have to make sure that at least the masjid is paying your Social Security tax, so that when you reach the age of retirement, you'll be able to take some money from retirement from that Social Security that you have been paying over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So Social Security is one part that is that you can receive income. Another place is the employer-based 401ks. There's other plans where your employer, your masjid, or for your community, because this is not only for the imams. This is also for your community members. So they work for a company, a masjid or for a profit, and they have a retirement plan. This retirement plan is many people actually that I know don't want to invest in because they think maybe it's haram. So we want to try to clarify what that is. What is halal and haram? I think Sheikh Ma'an Qadha will later speak about the scholar part. So I'm going to talk to you about just the conventional accounts that you should have. Just one important part that I want to make sure that we keep in mind before we keep going, because it's important when we talk about the 401k. How many of you, actually there's a study that was done in 2011, and I believe it was updated in 2014, that about 88% of Muslim households have halal food in their house. So at one time or another, they buy halal food. They make sure that there's no pork, no lard, right? So we care about our meat, zabiha. We want to make sure it's correctly done. We look at the candy to make sure that it doesn't have any lard or any other preservatives that might be haram. But in the financial area, there's about 18% who care about their halal investments. So there's about 18% of the community who decides that they're not going to participate in the Islamic finance, either in the mortgages or in the investment. And that happens, two things either happen. One, they don't care and they invest in conventional, which means they buy companies with riba, banking, insurance, casinos maybe. Or they go to the other extreme, which is not to invest at all for their retirement. So you have one or the other that happens. But with that same study, what happened, they said, the Muslim community said, there were about 900 that were asked, they said that if you educate us, 93% of them actually said, if you inform us, educate us about the investments in Islamic finance, we will participate in the Islamic finance. So that the community is saying to the imams, to the different companies, that if you give us information, we will participate in Islamic finance. So this is an important part of your job. Our job is to make sure the community understands that retirement is important and there is a halal solution for their retirement. So they will not be going to the haram or impermissible products and services. So again, going back to the retirement, so there is a 401k, which is an employer-based company. You work for a company, the company pays a certain percentage. You guys heard, you pay 3%, the company pays 3%, you pay 3%, the company pays 3%. It's invested at the age of 59 and a half, you're eligible to withdraw that money. The traditional IRA, this is if you're not employed, you're not self-employed, or you're not working for a company, your company doesn't have a 401k, and you want to invest on your own. So most of you, if you don't have a retirement plan, you should have an IRA account. You can open it with as little as $100 and you invest in that for your retirement. And the third is personal savings. You save your own money, you put it in the bank or in some other products and services. And the next item is, we talked about Social Security. So Social Security, we all would like to have that Social Security, but do you know how much money you will be making from Social Security? So we're talking about the U.S. I know some imams are from Canada, but for the U.S., if you are going to receive Social Security, how much are you going to receive? How much money? So there's a table, approximately, of what you will earn in your Social Security. This is how much money you will be making. So as you can see, if you make around $21,000 a year, you will, your Social Security is going to be about $11,900 a year. And it goes all the way up to, if you make $117,000, your Social Security amount is $31,000. The question that we should ask for ourselves in our community is that enough to live? Most of us are barely making ends meet. We saw what happened with the government shutdown. Our employees could not even pay for their food. For one paycheck, you miss one paycheck, and you suddenly can't pay your bills, right? Your food. So we are all living very tight. Life is expensive. So how much money do I need in retirement? Does anybody have an idea of how much we need? So the studies have said that you need about 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. So whatever you make today, let's say you're retiring next year, you should have some source of income, about 70%. That might seem high, but it really isn't. Some people say it's even more, especially in the early days. Another way to say it is that you should have 10 to 12 times your income saved. So if your income is 50,000, 60,000, you should have around $700,000 in your account saved so that you can retire comfortably without needing other people to help supplement your salary. So this is the Social Security. So it gives you an idea. So do we Muslims and U.S. Save money? That's a question that people ask all the time. Obviously, people who don't save money. So the people of 18 to 34 have almost 70% have less than $10,000 in savings. The 35 to 54 have less than 40% approximately. And the boomers, which means 55 and above, have 28% have zero savings, and about 17% have less than $10,000. And the Muslim community is probably exactly like this study, which was done. So the idea is that people don't have money for savings. So this is going to cause the community harm in the future. When they are just spending their money, they're going to come to the masjid and ask you for zakat. We all know now that yesterday we heard people talk about divorcees or people, the sisters who need help. Can you imagine now if not only the sisters need help, the brothers need help as they age, and this source of funds will not be available to help them, and they will be, they would be in a dire situation. So we want to talk about investing and saving early. So when should I start investing? And I just want to give you an example. I'm sorry to say that, because this was taken from a study. They used Nicole and Ted. So two people save money, and one of them starts early, one of them starts a little later, and you can see the difference. So Nicole and Ted invest $450 a month. Nicole contributes for only 10 years, then stops, as you can see on the left hand, on your right, leaving her money in the IRA until her retirement at the age of 67. Ted contributes for 27 years until his retirement at 67. So how does Nicole enlarge a retirement account even though Ted contributed almost 3 times as much? So Ted contributed more than Nicole, but Nicole started a little earlier. She started when she was 25, and Ted started when he was much older. So the earlier you start, you have your money working, investing, and this money will grow faster, and it will be less pressure on you and the community and your members of the community to save for retirement. So I don't want to stress the idea of early retirement. So there's 2 types of retirement accounts, or let's say 3. One of them you save in your regular account, your savings, you put them in your bank account or in some account, you put money away. That's a savings, that's for your retirement. Another one is a qualified account. A qualified account means or non-qualified, there's 2 types. The government's regulations encourage you to invest for your retirement, to put money away for your retirement, because they don't want you to be in need of the government. Because the more people, Social Security was created because there was a large number of people who did not have enough money to live. So the government had to step in and help with that. So the government doesn't want us, all of us, to be relying on the government. They want us to be self-sufficient in a way. So we can save using bank accounts, like a bank savings, which is interest-bearing, which is haram. And I think Dr. Ma'an Qadha will go into that. I will try to stay away from the scholarly views because there might be some different views on different issues. Brokerage accounts and mutual funds. So actually mutual funds, I actually work for a halal mutual fund, and that's what we do. We provide mutual funds investment opportunities for Muslims so they can invest for their retirement. And there's other financial products and services like annuities. If you have anybody in the community who sells insurance products, they sell annuities. And there's also there's a question about their halal products. There's issues with that. So we want to try to stick to what is halal and available for retirement. So the most popular ones are the employer-based. So you work for a company, I have a 401k or 403b. There's no difference between, really, basically there's no difference between a 401k and a 403b. One of them is for a for-profit business, and the 403b is for a non-profit. So for example, a masjid would have a 403b. The rules are almost identical. I think the fees might be a little less for the non-for-profit. There's less filings. I'm not sure the details, but it's for our purposes, they work the same. Then we have simple. This is for small businesses. And then there's SEP, which is for self-employed. So some physician, oh, sorry. Wow. Sorry. Well, the
Sorry.
Do you mind if I talk while he's doing the camera? I mean, doing the screening. So there's, we were at the 401ks. Before we go into that, let me just say there's two types of retirement, qualified retirement plans. One is defined contribution, and one is defined benefits. So what is a defined contribution? Defined contribution is exactly what it means, to contribute. So I know exactly I'm paying X amount of dollars every month or every year. That's defined contribution. Defined benefit is I know that at a future time, I will get an exact number, like let's say I will receive $2,000 a month, like a Social Security, or if you recall many years ago, there were some pensions. So if you have people who work for governments or schools, districts, they receive pensions. So if you work 10 years, 15 years, at X amount of salary, you will receive this much money in retirement. Are we familiar with that? So that's a defined benefit, so we will receive that. That is actually, more people are moving towards defined contribution, which means I pay into a 401k, and then at the end of the, when I reach the age of retirement, I will have this money to live off. So this is what most people are doing right now. Most private individuals, most companies have that type of product, which is a 401k or like an IRA or any of those type of investments. So what we want to do is so we talked about the 401k. Now there is going to be questions, maybe you should raise them with Dr. Man, about, because you will be asked. So I have a 401k, it's Ramadan, I owe zakah, right? So the question is, do I owe zakah? When do I pay the zakah on the 401k? So this is something we need to keep in mind, and inshallah, I think they will address that also. So that's the 401k. It's money that you don't have available to you. This is money is available to you when you reach retirement. Okay. So you can see the table. On the screen. So there's an employer base, which means that your employer, which is the company you work for, they have a 401k or a simple plan, and then the self-employed has a SEP plan. So if you're self-employed, a physician, maybe a consultant, they could have a SEP plan, and that gives you more money to put away for retirement. Now, all of these types of vehicles are there's no halal haram to them in itself, because it's just a type of account. The question is, where do you go with that money? Where do you put that money? How do you invest that money is where the issue comes up about halal and haram. I'm not touching. Okay. All right. So hopefully that's clear. So that's the first part. The slide before this one was about when you're working for a company, right? You work for a company, they have a retirement plan, you contribute to it. etc. How about if I work maybe at a small business, they don't have a retirement plan. So what can I do? Or I work for a masjid and they don't have a retirement plan. So what do? I have maybe the best, another option, a separate option would be an IRA, which is an investment retirement account where you're able to put away this year, last 2018, $5,500. I believe this year it went up to another $1,000, $6,500. You'll be able to put that into an account, and that account, or every year you can put this amount, so that when you reach the age of retirement, you can withdraw the money. Okay, and while it's in that account, you would be able to invest it in a Sharia-compliant way. So there's two types of IRAs: traditional and Roth. I just want to make sure that you get familiar with these terms. Traditional and Roth. So there are two different types. One is it's pre-tax money. One is after-tax money. So one, you pay the tax, and then you invest the money, and then you can have it grow tax-free. And when it's time for retirement, you get to take that money without paying any taxes. The traditional way, you would take the deduction, so you lower your taxes today, but when you take the money, you will be, so you're basically deferring the taxes. You'll pay the taxes then. You will be paying no taxes in the meantime between now and the time of retirement. You're able to withdraw this. When I kept saying retirement age, you're able to start withdrawing without penalty at the age of 59 and a half. So at the age of 59 and a half, you can start withdrawing this money. Okay. And there's a little bit for married people. It's a certain requirements of income, what you can be used. So this is an individual retirement account that if you don't have a 401k, or you don't have a retirement with your company, or with your masjid, or individuals that you know in the community, you should encourage them to invest in them. And there's a table, gives you a comparison between the different parts of the SEP, and the SEP IRA, the Roth IRA, traditional IRA. Okay, so I'll just move over a little quicker. So rollover IRA, I just want to go over some of the words so that if people ask you questions about these, that you're at least familiar what these words mean. So rollover IRA would be someone, I work for a company, I have a 401k. I leave the company for another job. My money stays in that 401k in the old company. I can move that money from that account to a new account where I control where it's invested. Most of the time, the 401k is restricted to what companies you're allowed to invest in. So you have the company decides, this is the products we want to sell. The products that you have available for your investment. Now, because of the socially responsible investing and giving people more rights, more privilege over their accounts, some companies are giving access to more types of accounts, more funds for you able to invest in. So Muslims are now able, even if they work for General Motors or for any other company, they're able to invest in halal mutual funds or halal products. Like a 403B. So 403B most likely is through your masjid. So if you're a masjid, they should have halal products. So if you set up a 403B, and they can say, there's three major mutual fund companies, there's Azad, I believe, one of Bashar is here, and there's a third company, Amana. So the three companies can be put into a portfolio, and you can choose how to, you can diversify your investments as you fit. So yes, it can be done through the masjid. This applies to your school. So if you have a school in the masjid, it applies to all the employees. So it's highly recommended. There is a small fee that the masjid has to pay, but I think this is worth it for the administration, for the idara, to make sure that you feel secure, that you're working when you're healthy, when you're giving them the best times of your life, that when you're getting older and you need assistance, you don't need to go back to the community and ask so-and-so. And that applies to the community itself. They cannot be relying on people's gifts from even from their children. Life is expensive, and children have their own problems to deal with rather than have to give money to their parents. So non-qualified plans, I will not go over too much on that. I'll just put some of there's deferred compensation plans like 457B. That's for government agencies. Most individuals that you will deal with will not be, they will not have, most of them will not, this will not apply to them. So I will not, it's just for the time. I just want to go over a few things because part of retirement is educational for our children. We all have, so we would, when we are living our life, we try to balance between saving for our retirement and then saving for our children's education. And we need to kind of make sure that we do both, but not do one and not the other. Not to put so much effort into saving for the children and making sure that they get the education and then forget our own retirement. So we want to make sure that we protect ourselves so that we can protect our children. The stronger you are, the stronger your children will be. There are two different types of accounts that you can put away for your children. So someone from your community will ask you, is this halal or is this, what type of accounts? There's two types of accounts: the Coverdale Educational Account, Savings Account, and the 529 plans. We offer, for example, the Coverdale Educational Fund. It's there's a maximum of $2,000 a year. The 529 plans we don't offer. I don't think most halal, the Sharia compliant investments don't apply 529, but they're more flexible. You can hide more money in it, and you can ask our shield for the halal part. But for our purposes, there's two types of accounts. So people will ask you, my financial advisor would say, invest in a 529. Should I or shouldn't I do? You should be able at least to know what a 529 that is for students' education, so that when they grow older, from when they're 2 years old, they get to 18, you have to pay for tuition. You'll be able to do that. And they also apply to high school. So even if you want to decide to spend it on their high school education, they go to an Islamic school, you can spend that money on tuition, room and board in the Coverdale educational part, but not in the 529s. The 529s only go to the tuitions. Health savings plan, I just want to make sure that you are aware there is something called the health savings plan, where you can save money for, you're sick and you need to put money away. This is for people with high deductible. Very few of us will ever encounter that to need this, but it is available. There's something called the health savings plan. And so I'm going to go just real quickly, and this will probably be a good segue to our brother to go over once you have these accounts, there's nothing halal or haram about them. So where do you invest? So there's something called equities, which are stocks, companies. You buy shares of Apple, shares of Google. Mutual fund, which is basically a pool. You pool people's money together, because that way the cost will go down. So for example, for us, you can invest as little as $250 or $100 in your IRA, and it's a pool of hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of investors. There's real estate. You can invest in real estate. So you can have a real estate investment. You can have a money market account. There's a question about the halal, because it's basically going to give you some type of interest in that account. But it's just so you know that account does exist. That option exists. There's ETFs. ETFs are exchange-traded funds, which work similar to a mutual fund, much lower fees, and it's traded in the stock exchange just like a stock would. There's managed accounts, people with high net worth, high investments amounts, maybe in the 50,000, 100,000, even more than that actually. They will have some managed account where they'll have an investment advisor give them, to manage that. There's private funds. You can invest in a private fund where it's not public. It's a group of people, and you invest with them, and they invest it accordingly. And there's self-directed. This is something that a lot of people are getting into, which is, I have a 401k. I can transfer. Once you transfer out of the company, you can put into an account, and then you decide where to invest that money. So if you decide to go into a partnership with 2-3 friends into real estate to buy a piece of property, as long as you're not living, you're not benefiting personally from it. But there's some restrictions. You're able to use that 401k to invest in that real estate project. So you're able to do that. Okay. All right. So time's up. Okay. We have to make sure that there's halal, and I think this would conclude my presentation. There is zakat and there's purification. And I believe the Sheikh will go over that. Those are two important parts that one should be aware, that this money is zakat, or you have to pay zakat. There are different understanding of, there's different zakat requirements, and there's purifications to cleanse the money, because we all have, there's some contamination. I believe the Sheikh Fadlas mentioned yesterday, some in the income. So you need to cleanse it. You have to clean it, and you purify it by doing that. So I hope that covers everything, and inshallah I'll be able to answer any questions you have. Please forgive me if I made any mistakes or I took too long. So thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair, Brother Muhammad. Just for everyone's information, this session is 1 hour and we have 2 presenters. Each of them has 30 minutes, so there will not be questions and answers until later, after we complete the retirement portion of the program, inshallah ta'ala. So without any further ado, let me invite Brother Muhammad Wahdi, inshallah ta'ala. He's going to continue in speaking about retirement accounts. Tfaddal.
جزاك الله خير شيخ. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just bear with me one moment while I change the slide deck. Okay. So, just a few notes before I start. I just want to thank Amja for putting this event together and obviously having this topic being part of it. Investing in retirement is a big part of every person's life. And the fact that, as imams, you probably get questions all the time from people asking you about, is this investment halal or is this transaction halal? So the fact that Amja puts together a great resource for you guys, I think, is just fantastic. Another thing is that, I'm not an expert on the Sharia component. We have Dr. Mang and we have a few of the other Mashaykh here. But I am more of an expert on the markets and investment side. So, my goal really is to be someone of a reference on that side. The last thing is just, when we're doing presentations like this, there's going to be a lot of jargon. I noticed in Brother Nasser's presentation, which was really good from my standpoint, eyes were glazing over. There's like words thrown out like 401ks, IRAs, and there's, for us, it's, we use these words all the time, but, for someone that's not familiar with these, it can be a little confusing or a little bit instrumental. So bear with me with that. I'm going to end up doing the same thing, but if there's something that's a little confusing, just let me know, and inshallah I'll pause. But that I'll begin, inshallah. So the way that I'm actually presenting this is, it's basically the same thing that Nasser's presentation was on, essentially the retirement component. But what I really want to do is I want to approach it from a kind of a strategic component to really help, the imams address some of the concerns that their, community members may have. So, in general, investors will face the question of, how much, money do I need to save for retirement? How much, what should I invest in, and what type of account should I use? But the, the Islamic investor or, an investor that's looking for like a halal portfolio is going to have additional questions like, how do I substitute for haram investments? When should I pay zakah? And then how do I purify a partially haram profit? So we have put together kind of 5 things just to kind of keep in mind, and hopefully this will be of use for you when you're discussing this with some of the community members. The first part is really just understanding the accounts, choosing a retirement strategy from the account side. The second step is really understanding the fiqh, knowing what's the basis for what's a permissible or an impermissible investment. The third one is, how do you manage exposure? So exposure is like, if you're investing in something that might have income that is, not permissible, how do you manage that? The fourth one is, managing the zakah component. Should you pay out zakah yearly, or should you pay it at a lump sum at the end? And then the fifth step is really just understand how to purify the haram income. So on the retirement accounts, Brother Nasser kind of went through the whole, all of the different types. I'm just going to simplify it. So there's really three types of accounts. You have like a standard investment brokerage account, which gives an investor a lot of control, but there's no tax advantage. Okay, so in general, if you go to a bank or a brokerage firm and you open an account with them, that's generally what it'll be. The other type of an account is an employer-sponsored account. Okay, 401k, 403b, things like that. Why are they called 401k or 403b? It's actually in the IRS tax provision. in their manual, they call it the IRS Rule 401k. The benefit for using an employer-sponsored plan, is the tax advantage. Generally speaking, these employer-sponsored accounts will be what we call qualified, which means that you can put money into the account, you can say before it goes to your bank, which means this is before you pay taxes. A lot of these employer-sponsored plans will also provide some type of a matching contribution. So, many plans do this, not all of them do. One of the drawbacks of an employer-sponsored plan, though, is just the limited control. Usually, when an employer sets up an account for you, they're going to give you like a small menu of investments, and there'll all be different types of funds or different types of things, and sometimes that can be a little confusing. The third type of an account is an individual retirement account, also called an IRA or an IRA. These accounts have some type of a tax advantage to them, depending on your income and how much you contribute to the account. One of the nice things about them is that there's a high degree of control of the investment, so you can really choose amongst most things. But there's no type of a contribution. So that means that your employer isn't going to make an investment in that account. So hopefully that kind of clarifies these three types of accounts. On the fiqh side, and I'm sure Dr. Mann will go into this in more detail, there's really three different components to this. What makes an investment halal or haram, or permissible or impermissible? Is an investment fully or partially haram, right? How do you deal with mixed investments? And then what about ethical funds? So there's going to be a follow-up discussion on investments that will talk more specifically about what makes them haram or halal. But a general kind of rule is that most of the, you could say the agencies that provide some type of a Sharia compliant guideline say that generally speaking, if an investment has less than 5% of their income coming from haram sources, it's generally permissible. Now the challenge for this is that there's a lot of companies out there that are going to have some type of a interest income, or they're going to have some type of a another type of an income from a different business that might be haram. Another challenge is that you're going to have products in your investment. If you say pick a mutual fund or an exchange traded product, these things may have a variety of different stocks in them or different companies in them, right? You could have 500 companies. Some of those companies might not be halal, or they may have non-halal income. How do you purify for that? And then the last thing is really about ethical funds. So there's over the past 1 or 2 decades, there's been a big move into what's called the ESG scene, which is really this push for ethical, sustainable, and good governance type of funds. The problem with these funds is that a lot of them, even though they may be ethical, so that means that they may not invest in, say, like weaponry or like defense companies. Unfortunately, many of them, they make up for that by investing heavily in financials. So just because a fund says ethical doesn't mean that it's more permissible. That's one thing to keep in mind. On the haram exposure, this is a big question that people have. Should they abstain or should they purify? Right? A lot of people, when they realize that a stock investment or a fund or a product, it's going to have some haram element. Should I just avoid it, or is there a purification process? So that's probably going to be more of a personal decision that people make, or something that you all can comment on. But one thing to keep in mind is, just what are the costs of purely abstaining from something that could be mixed, right? So, for example, if you have a member of your community who says, "Oh, Sheikh, I've got a 401k, but the money sits in, say, a money market account, or the funds are very limited, they're very vague or very broad. What should I do?" This is a real dilemma that people face, right? So one of the things is, if it's a 401k and if the company provides some type of a match, that person is going to miss out on an employer match, okay? And what a match means is just, if you put $3,000 into the account, the company might put, say $1,500 or a certain amount. They'll usually give a specific percentage that they will contribute to. The other thing is that, say someone decides to move with a 401k and they're investing in it or another type of an account. Generally speaking, the investment world out there, it's pretty big. It goes from, equities like stocks to fixed income like bonds, and then other things as well, like futures on commodities, or you have currencies, or you have a lot of things that are in between. When most Muslims or when most people try to aim for a Sharia compliant investment, that they're looking for something that's typically on the equity side. Now, the challenge with that is that when most conventional, managers or financial advisors give advice, they usually give it on something called asset allocation, which just means that, you should split up your money to try to diversify to minimize your risk, right? The problem is that most of those models to diversify will use those haram investments. So a big challenge that Muslims have is, how can they diversify? A lot of people think that just by buying 2 stocks means that you're diversified. No, you're still in the equity asset class. So if the market goes down, you're going to go down. Even if you hold 50 stocks, it doesn't matter. They're all stocks. So this is a big challenge that people in the community face. There are some solutions that are kind of floating around. Unfortunately, in the United States, it's still a big challenge for Muslims. So, one of the things that, the community members will have to know is just they're going to have to minimize haram investments where possible, and just kind of aim to plan ahead for the rest, which means that, Muslim investors will need to keep in mind that because they're limited to a small subset of the universe of investments, there's going to be a little bit more risk. There's going to be a little more, we like to call it volatility and things like that, which will change the nature of their relationship with their investments. So that's just something to keep in mind. You will have people come to you and say, "Oh, Sheikh, my stock is on 10% or greater." But the thing is that that's just a risk that they're going to have to bear with, because we don't really have alternatives to, say, fixed income. On the zakat side, we just kind of think that it's important to just use a simplified approach. So, we put together a paper actually on this in the booklet. So if you want to look at the different methods of calculating zakat or paying zakat on the investments, I recommend taking a look at that. But one of the things that is true is that the ranges of zakat are greater than just, say, 2.5%. So there's going to be different zakat payments on different assets. And for someone that wants to be more prudent, they may need to look at how to calculate each of those different zakat payments. Now, one of the big questions that people have is, well, if I have a 401k account or an IRA or any type of a tax advantage account, should I pull money out to pay for zakat and thereby pay some type of a penalty? Or should I just keep the money in, and once I can pull the money out in my retirement age, pay the zakat all at once? We think that it actually makes more sense just to pay it on an annual basis, because if you wait till retirement, the amount that you'll owe for zakat might be quite massive. It could be 30 to 50% of the portfolio value. So one of the things that you could do is just pay. You could advise a member of the community just to pay the zakat out of a different account, or take the penalty, pull a little bit of the money out, and then pay. And if they do that, based on the analysis that we did on IOFI guidelines, you could actually reduce the total zakatable assets by the withdrawal penalty. So there's things you could work with. And again, please reference the research paper in the book for more information on that. On the purification side, there's probably going to be a little bit more of a difference of opinion on this, so we're just providing the more general kind of a guideline. It's generally acceptable to hold investments that may have a small portion of haram income, so long as the profit on that is donated. The other day, for example, Dr. Mann was talking about, okay, if you buy a real estate property and, a leasee, for example, is, a nightclub or a bar, while you're stuck with that leasee, you could still be compensated for that. But, maybe you want to donate the amount that might come from interest, for example. So the challenge with that is, well, then how do you figure out how much of the portfolio is haram or comes from haram income? And then how do you purify on that? Fortunately, this is a really complicated, topic. And a very complicated process, because you can look at it from like a company standpoint, right? If you're stuck in a mutual fund or in you could say a pooled investment, which might have many different stocks, what if only one out of the 500 is impermissible? Well, how do you exclude that amount? It's complicated. The other question is, well, then how do you purify income from a company? Say you own just one stock, and part of the income that company gets might be impermissible. How do you purify that amount? Do you, sell a certain amount? Do you take a deduction on the percentage of the value of the share? These are all kind of questions that Muslim investors face. We provide two of the most common methodologies that are used to purify the investments. One that's that IOFI recommends, and then another one that we saw just come up when we did our survey of different fatawa. And these are all, of course, in the booklet for you guys to review. So, in summary, Islam encourages financial responsibility and discourages unnecessary risk-taking. Fortunately, this is a dilemma that Muslim investors are going to deal with, because by trying to be financially prudent and by trying to also remain within Sharia compliance, they may also be taking additional types of risks. And this is an important thing for them to keep in mind. The other big point is that, you need to understand that the common retirement strategies that most people will pitch or advisors basically include haram solutions, or they try to minimize risk by incorporating some haram component, like bonds or things like that. However, Sharia compliance does not mean avoiding retirement accounts, or does not mean that you should not save for retirement. It's just going to require a lot of planning ahead for the individual and the community, inshallah. And then with that basically concludes my slides. And I did try to make it a little shorter, so if you had any questions, we can answer them, inshallah. So.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Wahdi. So alhamdulillah, Brother Wahdi has completed 10 minutes early. So that means we have a small window for some questions and answers now. But the main session for question and answers is 10:30. But if anyone has a question regarding what they've heard so far this morning, then we'll utilize this 10 minutes, inshallah ta'ala, with the same protocol as yesterday and throughout the conference, that the questioner has 90 seconds to complete their question, and the researcher will reply in 2 to 4 minutes. So we have time then probably for 3 or 4 questions possibly. So we'll begin on my right, since we have a brother at the microphone. Tafadhal ya akhi. Where is Muhammad? Is it working? The 90 seconds is up. We give him 10 seconds to get it. Okay, this one is not working? Okay, inshallah, so therefore, you nothing there either. Uh, yeah, the brother says he can speak louder, so yeah. MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. My question is regarding the educational accounts. There are two accounts that we looked at in the presentation. One is the Coverdale educational accounts and the 529 plans. The question is really regarding the children's educational accounts which we set up. Now, in the future, let's say the child gets a scholarship or gets out of any kind of a free educational funding. What is the best way we can ensure to take this money out?
Thank you very much. So the question is, in both cases, the Coverdale Educational Fund and the 529, what happens if your son becomes, or daughter, are A students and they get a scholarship full ride, or they decide not to go to college? So you can transfer that to a sibling. There's rules. You can, to a sibling, to the mother, grandmother, son. They can go down to their children. I believe even to one first cousin. So you can move that money around. Even if that child does not need that money, you can transfer it to another relative. Now, relative there's a limit. I mean, there's a brother, sister, cousin, aunt, mother. No penalty. I'm sorry? They have to use, okay, the 529 has to be for tuition only. I believe that is, what the requirement is. For the Coverdale, for any educational purposes, which means room and board, transportation, going to school, buying a car, books, supplies. So, it's a very, broad definition of anything that has to do with schooling. It could be also for Islamic school. You can. So if you open an account when the child is born and they reach the age of 10 and you want to send it to an Islamic school, you can use that money to send it to an Islamic school. The Coverdale educational, not the 529. The 529 you could, but there's guidelines, and I have to look at the exact rules for that. I hope that answers it.
We need to go to the left side now, but you don't have a microphone, so you need to raise your voice. Sisters have a mic? Go ahead.
Jazakallah khair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Just bear with me, brother, a little, because all the terms are new to me, the jargon thing. So you mentioned something about B403, and you mentioned something about a masjid paying minimal fee so we can participate as imams, and even other employees of the masjid can participate in that investment, correct? I just need to understand two things. The first thing about matching, you mentioned something about matching. I deposit something, the masjid deposits something. So is it investment to the masjid? That's number one question. And number two is, can masjid as well, because most masajid have some funds that put on the side. Can they be investing their money at the same time in these?
Okay, is it okay if I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I got questions. Okay.
So it was Sheikh Salah, and now myself, Sheikh Salah, not you alone. So that's all. Jazakumullah.
Okay. So two parts. How does the 401? So let's say the 401k and the 403b, for our purposes here, let's just assume they are identical. Okay. So we don't want to differentiate between the two. So what happens? This is when an employer, meaning the masjid, or a company, an organization, wants to keep their employees to the company. They want to keep loyalty. So they give them a salary. They want to pay them compensation. So they pay salary. They might give bonuses. Maybe in the masjid, after Ramadan, you give the imam extra mukafa'a for the hard work of during Ramadan. Another way is to compensate them using a 401k plan. This is a way to give them compensation, but not immediate. So it's not a salary. This is something for the future. So what happens, it's not obligatory, it's not an obligation, but it's known that the 401k is set up where you would contribute for $1, and the organization might contribute another $1, and they would put that in the account that is in your name. It'll be your name, but it's administered by, or the masjid or the company is the one that is actually setting up the accounts. They set up the account with a company, and they will be able to put that money. You will be able to take that money in your name and invest it in the stock market. It's your money. If you leave the masjid, that money goes with you. You might be able to withdraw. You can withdraw the money. So let's say after 2 years, you decide that you need the money, or somehow you have an emergency and you need the money. You can withdraw it. You will be paying taxes and you will pay penalty, but this is your money. Okay? Is that?
And the second part can
The second part.
as entity.
Yes. So the second part, can masajid invest their excess money in the market, in the stock market? And the answer, we're a company, it's a subsidiary of another Islamic organization, NAID. So we actually have a considerable amount of money from masajid. I think maybe half there's like 40-50 million that are masajid, like example in Houston, ISGH, Islamic Society of Greater Houston, in Chicago, Mosque Foundation. They have investments. They put money with us to invest it, and so that the money grows over time, and it becomes an asset for the masjid. It becomes like a waqf, so that one day, maybe the masjid doesn't need to raise money to pay for the imam, the electricity, the gas, and the cable, or the satellite, not cable, the internet. It'll be paid for by this investment that you would have. It's a pool. Schools, maybe they help pay some of the expenses, just like many of the other non-Muslim organizations. Alhamdulillah, now we see a lot more masajid and Islamic organizations setting up waqf programs. Waqf not necessarily meaning putting the property in trust, but making money available so that you will be able to help subsidize the fundraising. Fundraising, you all have to do fundraising. Is a very difficult job to raise money every year for the same expenses. So this is a way to offset that, inshallah.
Can I make a quick addition to that?
10 seconds.
Okay. One of the things about 401ks, so this is a little different for 403bs, but for 401ks, this is just an account structure. They're basic commodities now, which means that the fees to create and manage a 401k are very low. So you definitely should shop around. There are a lot of custodians and trust management companies that provide these. There's no reason to take a very excessive fee because it's just an account structure. You can then make a selection on the investments at a different time. So, that's one thing to keep in mind. When it comes to...
And you all are going to be available at the other question and answer session, correct? Because we still have another session on the ahkam and حسابات التقاعد. So inshallah, that's what we're going to right now. So there's no break now. We're going to move right into this next section, inshallah ta'ala, with the mashayikh. And then at the end of that, there will be another opportunity for questions and answers. So it was my intention to get a question from the sisters as well, but with the technical difficulty, we didn't have time. So perhaps they could start that question and answer session with the sisters, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan wa barakallahu feekum.